Thanks to everyone who jumped on today. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jeff Yeagley with Compass IT Compliance, and I'll be moderating today's webinar with ISACA. And the topic of today's webinar is AI and cybersecurity, navigating the promise and pitfalls. So before I go ahead and introduce our panelists, just go over a couple of quick housekeeping items. First thing is everybody's on mute. But we want to encourage people to ask questions. So if you do have questions as part of the webinar that you want the panelists to ask, on the bottom of the screen, there should be a chat function. You go ahead and put the question in the chat rather. The panelists will see it, I'll see it, and then we can ask those as they arise and as time permits. The other thing too is, since we're doing this in partnership with ISACA, please set your Zoom name to your first name and last name if you're going to be getting CPE credits for today's webinar, so that way they can issue the certificate to the right person and not have to try and guess or figure out who it might be. So please just set that Zoom name to your first name and last name. We have this scheduled for about an hour. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then we're going to jump right in and start with some of the different questions. So in no particular order, I have CJ Hurd, who is the Senior Vice President of the Virtual CISO practice here with Compass IT Compliance. We have Chris Willis, who is the VP of Cybersecurity and Network Engineering with one of our partners, Sayers. We have Lynn Friedman, who is chair of the data privacy and cybersecurity team with Robinson and Cole. And last but certainly not least, we have Katie Truchon, who is assistant professor of the IT department at the New England Institute of Technology. So we have a pretty diverse panel with a lot of great experience. So again, encourage you to ask those questions and pop those into the chat as you see fit. So we'll get into the first question here in terms of starting this off here. And really, AI is everywhere, right? It's in the news. We kind of see it. Everyone's coming out with different AI capabilities and functionality. And ChatGPT was probably one of the first ones that really gained incredible prominence and recognition when it comes to AI. But we're starting to see this spread across multiple different industries, vertical markets. And obviously, as the title of the webinar indicates, that's going to introduce some potential challenges for organizations to go through and manage. So the first question we'll ask is, how might AI impact the future job market in corporate IT security and compliance? So I'm going to have, I think I'll have Chris Willis start off with this one and kind of talk through that, and then we'll just open it up to the rest of the panelists.
Certainly. Yeah. So I would say that right now, the cybersecurity jobs, the vacancies that exist is pretty interesting, and it's a concern. So that's one thing. The second thing is I don't see AI impacting the cybersecurity jobs at the moment. I think it's only going to help the jobs that we have out there. It's going to help in so many areas because it's a positive thing for cybersecurity. It's going to be better recognition, helping out with better optimization of tools, better ability to quantify risk, doing a lot of the mundane tasks that a lot of people don't want to do. When you think about kind of defining AI as analysis at scale, that's one thing we have a problem doing, is analyzing all of these log events at scale, which a lot of people going to college or whatever coming out don't want to sit in front of a computer looking at log events. So I think it's going to help augment the strategy of the jobs in security. And I think it's going to let us be more strategic in cybersecurity and focus on other things. So I think it's a good thing. I'm excited to see it.
Awesome. Does anybody else on the panel have any pieces?
Yeah, I agree with everything Chris said, and I think he pointed out really well. The one place where I think I see it I don't want to use the word replacing, but supplementing, is some of those entry-level positions, right? Some of those mundane tasks that we talk about. It's the writing of policies. It's some of the documentation things. It's the things that, instead of creating it on our own and customizing it to our organization, we're using AI to help us write these things that says, okay, we do this, 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 and this. And then does that person actually know what it means? Can that company actually operate within that environment? So I think that while it's helping companies maybe lower costs, not having to pay as much staff, what happens in the future when we try to elevate people, or our senior people become more senior, and now these junior folks that we count on to kind of backfill those positions, what kind of knowledge do they have? Are they able to get into those entry-level jobs? And I'll give a quick story that I'm doing reviews on employees and analysts that we have here. And one of the self-appraisals that I have on one of them talked about how much they've learned from writing policies and helping implement them within an organization, right? And if we're going to have companies that, instead of having somebody come do that, have AI write it, what kind of experience does that person get? And then what kind of program does a company have, because they got enough of ChatGPT or some program that wrote it for them?
Yeah, I would add that I think there will definitely be an increase in opportunities and jobs on the compliance side, because you do need eyeballs on those policies too. You need people who have experience, and you've got to have a human eye looking to make sure that the organization can comply with those AI tool generated policies. The worst thing from a legal perspective and a compliance perspective is if you have policies that you cannot comply with. So I still think, I think it's going to be the opportunities, at least from what I'm seeing, is very much going to be in the compliance side and the risk management side of the use of AI tools.
Yeah, and if I could just kind of add and underline all three of your points already, I definitely think that as we kind of have more of these quote unquote mundane tasks handled by AI, that need for oversight and review, or as Lynn is very aptly saying, we need human eyeballs on it, because while we can build systems with, very specific data recognition, you still need to ensure that someone is giving a check to that, and that any sort of little issues are being cross-examined. So while we may see some of those more mundane tasks pushed aside, I see a lot of opportunity for those mid-level and higher oversight positions that are going to be needed to kind of watch over what they're building for us.
Yeah, great point. Anybody else on the panel have anything that they want to add to that piece? I think that it's interesting. You're right, because there's a lot of mundane tasks, right? But that human oversight is so critical, because to Lynn's point, it's one thing to have the policy, but you have to follow the policy, right? And so if you have, an AI solution like a ChatGPT write the policy, may not be necessarily applicable, and it's certainly not going to be customized to the organization, right? And that's kind of the big problem that you're going to come across, or one of many problems you may come across without that human element still involved.
Well, I'll add to that, Jeff, too. So I live in fear, right? When somebody asks me, and I have trust issues, right? So those are things that people who know me know well about me. When somebody gives me something to review, I probably overread it. I feel like there's going to be something trying to trick me in there, something testing me to make sure that I actually read what's in there. And I see that with, call it a QA, right? It's great to use some of these tools out there to help us, to supplement us, to kind of get us going. But at what point are we reading what's in there? And to Lynn's point, once we come in and get audited and people are actually holding us accountable for what we're saying we're doing, and then we say, oh, I won't say the proper word, but I didn't know that was in there, or how did that get in there? And now our entire credibility is kind of in question. And all right, well, if you're not doing this, you didn't know this was in there, what else is in there? And now they start digging deeper, and maybe we just don't know. So I think, again, trust but verify, right? It's great to use these tools to get that information, but we've got to QA ourselves. We've got to make sure that we're writing this for our company, for our program, but that we actually are doing it and complying with what's in there. That's the gap. It's great. You can call out every single security control that's out there, right? You can have them. I had somebody send me their policy one time, doing a risk review of them, and it was literally the entire NIST 853. It was 1,600 pages, and I said, "Come on, like I came from the military. I spent 21 years in the military. I know what this looks like. There's no way you're doing all this. You're a 20-person company, so you start not trusting what they're giving you." Does that happen? Right.
On top of that, though, if you've got a policy and you're saying you're complying with it, and that's the policy of the company, if you have a security incident and you get involved in litigation and that's your policy, I mean, I'm having a ball cross-examining everybody on your team about how you're not doing any of it. Get the checkbook out. That and regulators, like, so you go through an audit after a security incident by a state AG, and we're starting to see a lot more of those. If your policies say, you know, we shall ensure that blah, 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 as a former regulator, I'm having a ball with that too. So you got to be real careful about how you're presenting what you're doing. And that's why that human oversight is so important, to make sure that it's not overstating what you're doing, and so that both regulators and plaintiffs' attorneys can't, you know, have a ball with you. Yeah.
It's an interesting point. You're right. I like CJ's piece about trust but verify, right? And I think that's a great way to kind of operate in this type of environment. You know,
we can't blindly trust AI. What do you mean?
no, I mean we can, but then you know Lynn's gonna have a field day with us, so I don't know if that's a great idea. So
The hallucinations are really going to be fun. I can't wait.
you know, it's funny when we talk about different things that come out, and obviously AI is dominating everything right now, with it being in the news, and again, all these companies coming out with different AI enabled features and functionality. What are the training requirements for IT personnel when they're integrating AI solutions into the security infrastructure? CJ, I'll start with you on this one because you probably deal with this fairly regularly, would be my guess.
So this may not be the popular answer, but kind of going back to what we just talked about, I don't know that it changes, right? I think it's fine to use some of the AI to help us assist with the code writing, or give them a command and have it write it for us, and we go to implement it. But it still requires the same kind of QA. The same pieces from a compliance standpoint still exist, right? We can't just blindly trust AI and what it provided for us. We still have to QA it and test it and make sure it goes through those same functions that we have, and also understanding what are we using a privileged access to get us to that point. So I think that while we may go back to relying on AI to help us get over that, I guess writing a book or writing an essay, how do I start it, right? I can see AI helping us there and helping us maybe get through some of the harder pieces. But what's required to go into that infrastructure and the controls that exist, they don't change. So my answer really is that you still need to understand what you're doing, and that's where I don't think AI replaces that human element to that extent, because you still need that expert engineer to be able to actually turn what you get out of AI or some of that code into the infrastructure and what it's going to actually look like.
And if I could jump in, as at the college level, I have a lot of incoming students who are super interested in AI and they're so excited. And a lot of what I do here is, teach foundational programming classes so that students have an understanding of software engineering and language. And I've had so many students that are working with some of our code-based AIs that help them write code and are like, why do I have to learn this if AI is going to be able to write it for me? And I'm like, well, if you want a job, you need to know how it works. You need to know when it's actually giving you an efficient choice, or to kind of be able to filter through what it is suggesting for you to do. So I would definitely echo what CJ is saying, that while we may have new trainings for different ways in which to prompt AI, I think it has a great opportunity to kind of give some conceptual brainstorming and questions. You still need people to understand how those pieces actually fit together, and if they are what you actually need. And you need a human to look at that infrastructure and those pieces to ensure that that's happening.
It's interesting. There was a study out at the beginning of the year. I don't know if you all have seen it, where basically the conclusion was that code developers who were using AI tools, the security of the code was worse than if they did it themselves. And so I think that's a real lesson, that You can't just rely on AI tools, especially when it comes to the embedded security.
I wish I could share some of the practical quiz examples I received yesterday of, giving a really simple prompt and then having students provide very complex level code that I know they are not writing and they cannot explain. And if it breaks, they cannot go in and fix it. And so I think really I'm a big believer in understanding that foundational level and building from there. But I always think it's important to have that background in the quote unquote long way before you utilize a shortcut tool.
Kate, I'm actually ask you a question. Do you feel like they're, when you have that conversation, are they getting it? Right? Are they understanding that there's not necessarily a shortcut to where they're trying to get?
Some of them are. I primarily teach in our associates level, so a lot of the times they have to be kind of beaten down in the real world to understand this actual consequences. But I do think, through the conversations I've been having with the students that are interested, I'm always trying to encourage them to, do a deeper dive into software. AI tools are built from programming. And so if you do the due diligence of that foundational study, I think I've been able to convince most of them that there is a lot of value there.
Yeah,
hopefully.
I feel like it's a little reminiscent of the security in medical devices and software back in the day, and now with 0-day vulnerabilities, that security wasn't embedded. And so it's really important, Katie, that you're teaching these students about embedding the security and not to rely on AI tools. And that is one of my fears in the future, is how AI tools and the reliance will affect security in general.
Yeah. And I think it always comes back to that idea of, should we be totally terrified of them? No, but you can't just use the tools and expect things to work out well. You have to have that background knowledge.
Yeah, I would agree, Katie. I think you hit the nail on the head. I would say that whenever you go into anything, you need to know what is the purpose, what are the outcomes that I'm expecting to do. AI is not going to always get you to where you want to be right off the bat. And having that oversight, you're going to be able to, AI should be augmenting what we're doing. It should not be replacing what we're doing. Sometimes it's going to augment more than in some areas than others, but it's really about being responsible and understanding the outcomes and how we're going to get to those outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's a great line, Chris. Augmenting and supporting your efforts in doing it, not replacing it. I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, CJ. I was actually just going to say that to Chris, but you stole that from me, so I agree. It makes perfect sense.
I'm just quicker than you.
I know. I've noticed this. We'll move on to the next question here. And Lynn, I have a funny feeling. I'm going to direct this towards you because this is going to be right up your alley. What regulations are applicable and what is the legal landscape for the use of AI tools?
None.
All right, next. No.
No.
It's so new, right? This is kind of a hot thing that is gaining traction and whatnot. So, and as we know, these things take time and there probably has to be precedent set and that type of stuff. But if you can talk a little bit about what you're seeing, that'd be, I think, beneficial.
So there's no national regulation, and I think it's going to be some time before there is, if there ever is. We never saw a national data breach regulation. We never saw a national data privacy regulation. We don't have a national data security regulation. They're all state-based, and that's the way it's going right now because we don't have a national regulation law. Okay, yeah, we've got some guidance. We've got a lot of guidance. We've got a lot of people with their fingers in this, including the White House Bill of Rights, including the first executive order, including the second executive order that came out last week or 2 weeks ago. So the White House is actually trying to stay on top of it. CISA came out, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency came out with a roadmap earlier this week, which if you haven't seen it, you really should, with 5 different areas of it's called a roadmap, and they've got 5 effort levels, which, I've been doing this a long time, and to have the federal government, the White House and CISA come out pretty quickly is impressive. So they're on top of it. But right now, and this is just my prediction after seeing, 25 years of this. Right now, I don't think we'll be able to get Congress together to come up, even though it's a bipartisan issue. There is bipartisan support for, regulating AI, and we've got the technology companies saying, yes, please regulate us, which is always a little suspect. But it's a bipartisan issue, but we've got, 2 wars, we've got all sorts of other things. We've got, we were able to get the budget passed or the yesterday, which was the first time we've been able to do anything for a long time. I'm saying it also takes 17 years for laws, that's the average, to catch up with technology. So do I think something's going to happen quickly? No. That said, for the companies that are on the session, there are a lot of guidance and a lot of proposed regulations. If you're in the medical field, there are regulations and guidance from the FDA, from WHO, from the ONC, from the American Medical Association. If you are in different industries, you're seeing guidance. But where I think the action is going to be is in state law, because states are going to take the lead on this for consumer protection, which is what they always do. We're already tracking state laws that mention artificial intelligence, and there are many of them. So I think that if you want to stay on top of where laws and regulations are going to go, state laws are going to be enacted faster than a national law, in my humble opinion. And many state laws are going to be repetitive. Some will be different. And if you are a national or global company, you're going to have to stay on top of what those regulations are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know that it takes 17 years for a law to get enacted.
Around technology.
It's crazy. That's yeah. So we're just in the, I think we could all agree that we're probably in the infancy stages of AI, and while it's gaining a lot of attention, I think to your point, yeah, I would bank on anything happening in the very near future at the national level.
Though I will say that the executive order did put very specific requirements on the Department of Commerce, but also on HHS and other federal agencies to be thinking about regulations. So I don't think it's going to take 17 years on this one, because of the EO and because all of the federal agencies are required to figure out how they're going to regulate their specific industries. So you're going to see, I think, very specific regulations around specific industries, financial services, critical infrastructure in this area quicker than we've ever seen before, which doesn't mean real quick, but yeah.
But still quicker. And that's always a positive thing.
So be on the lookout. Yeah, I think it's going to be quicker than we've seen before.
Yeah.
I think from a company perspective, they don't need to wait for laws to start creating policies right now that's going to protect their employees and consumers' data. And I think a lot of the data policies and data regulations that we have, GDPR, California privacy, and many other states, I think we can kind of go off of that, because AI is really going on top of data. And so if we can protect the data and get these policies in place now on the use of AI, the implementation of AI, that's going to significantly help.
Yeah, agreed. I would say AI is a little different, so I wouldn't rely on your GDPR or your CCPA or other state law compliance programs. I think you've got to look at it in a different way and actually be thinking about AI governance in your organization in a different way, because there are different risks. But Chris, I think it's a great point. You don't have to start at scratch. And the other thing that I would say is from from a legal perspective, when you're looking at your vendor management and you're looking at the risks associated with the use of AI tools, thinking about adding provisions about what can and can't be done with AI tools with your data is going to be very, very important.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that, Lynn, and I asked it in the stance that, and Chris brought it up, perfectly, been helping put policies in place for the use of AI for organizations and information that they can put into AI to make sure that private data stays private, proprietary data stays private. And I was wondering, in talking about the legality side to it, that just because the compromise happened or you negligently disclosed information through AI doesn't change your responsibility from a legal perspective, correct? Like it's still the company's responsibility, the individual responsibility to protect that data aligned with what the company's policy and these regulations are.
Yeah, the legal requirement of data loss itself probably doesn't change. So if you have an unauthorized disclosure into an AI tool, if one of your employees or one of your vendors, right, that the legal requirements, if it's an unauthorized access, use, or disclosure of personal information or PHI or something like that doesn't change. The problem with AI and why so many companies are concerned about vendors that are using their data to teach their AI tools is that it goes into a black box and now it's being used. It's further disclosed. And that's the first time we've ever really had that additional risk, so that if someone's personal information is now in an AI tool, try to get that back. You can't. And it's being used over and over and over and over and over and over. So that's the additional risk that I think from a vendor management standpoint, companies are really trying to get a handle on. How are you using my data? What data are you using? Can you use it in a glass box instead of a black box? And so those are the issues to be talking about with your vendors.
Like Zoom, for example.
like Zoom, for example.
That's a timely one right there for sure. And a quick shout out. I'm pretty sure all the participants have access to the chat. Brian Kelly was kind enough to pop in some of those resources, the White House executive order, the guidance, and the roadmap from CISA, and then also some other information from the Brennan Center. So Brian, thanks for I know you're on mute and can't respond, but thank you for popping that in there. I think it's interesting, right? And I always say the reason we can't have nice things is because of people are going to find a way to use it for evil, right? And that's probably a harsh statement to make, but how are adversaries and bad actors leveraging AI against organizations, and what can organizations do to respond, right? I don't know who wants to start that one off.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, go, Chris.
Okay. Yeah. So the adversaries, I think, are well funded. And I think they're going to leverage the tools at their disposal. So now they have AI at their disposal. So I think they're going to be able to mimic communications better, which in the old days we saw an email with, maybe the language was kind of weird. It's like, okay, this isn't legitimate. Now they're able to get those emails accurate without much effort, which is great on their side. They're able to do data analysis at a much better rate because they're using AI. So potentially build models that instead of like maybe exfiltrating data from a company, now they can take their AI component, put it into a company and just scan the data and look for something that they're after, passwords or social security numbers or whatever it may be. It's as simple as buying a data protection solution and looking for classification or discovery of sensitive data. They're using that for their goals. So the adversary has a lot more capabilities with AI now than what they used to, and that's what we got to be cognizant on.
And I think it does kind of come back to that conversation you were just having about the importance of data protection, because if an adversary can access parts of your data now, like Chris is saying, they're going to be able to, build out a potential model and have more fine-tuned sort of ways to try and infiltrate or attack a system. And then from another standpoint, as you're kind of mentioning how, it can study different language and text style and have better written kind of ploy emails. But that social engineering aspect is just going to grow further. I mean, we have AI tools now that can mimic voices just by having a couple of short clips. So that social engineering aspect is still a huge part of how do you know that a potential client is a real person or a real client? If, it would be a horrible situation to create a client, account for an AI model that is from an adversary, because now they're a part of your system. So I think, that's a huge other component to be thinking about.
Yeah, we're already seeing a huge increase in phishing incidents, successful phishing incidents. And the other thing that is very concerning, and there's a lot written on it, obviously, is because authentication, identity authentication, in particularly the financial services industry and others, go off your voice, right? And so they are now using voice recognition to be able to identify you for authentication purposes. And now the threat actors, are able to do that in seconds. So that's another way. And then obviously 0 days. They're definitely using AI for 0 days. Sorry, CJ, I probably interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, I always have something to say, so I'm always going to be interrupted. It's totally fine. And actually, piggyback on what you just had mentioned, Lynn. There's about an 8-minute. I don't want to call it article, but it was on Nightline, showing a mother who was duped, saying it was her daughter's voice, saying that she had been captured and she needed $1 million, and just hearing the panic in the mother's voice and how it was her daughter. In her mind, it was her daughter. And this has been happening for a long time. I had a family, a guy I served with, his mother got a similar call while he was deployed over in Afghanistan. And this was years ago. So it tells you how long, these things have been happening. But what I was also going to say earlier was we had 502 reported ransomware cases in the month of July, and that's in the United States alone, and that was a record. And then that record was broken in September with 514 ransomware events. Coincidence? That we're getting more sophisticated. Coincidence with everything that Chris said and Katie said and Lynn said. Is that a coincidence? And I think what that's done, and if, I'm sure most of you on here can picture this, picture our risk matrix, right? The likelihood and the impact, right? What I've been telling customers that I work with is that impact really hasn't changed, right? That impact is still the same. If ransomware, your files are encrypted, your files are deleted, removed, if you can't get to that data, that impact is still the same. The likelihood, however, has gone up, right? Which changes that risk matrix. And I really think that, and that's the other target, is that we're talking small and medium-sized businesses are the greater target, because the bad actors think that they have less training, less money to invest in the tools that can help protect them. So again, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's directly related to the increased use of AI and what these bad actors are doing. So it's hard, right? It's hard for us as security professionals to keep up with it. And I think the offense is always going to be ahead of the defense. And hopefully we can adapt and put as many measures to protect ourselves and our companies as we can.
Yeah, it's a good point, CJ. And it's always a game of cat and mouse, right? We're always kind of playing catch up, and it's the challenge, because anytime something like, AI comes out and is designed to make people's lives a little easier and more efficient and able to do things a little bit quicker, when it ends in the wrong hands, it's used against you, right? It's almost weaponized, if you will, and used against you in a way that that has significant ramifications for organizations. And I love the point that you made too, and especially in terms of small to medium businesses, right? And it's tough because they're the ones that are targeted the most, and also the ones that sometimes have the kind of mindset of, well, it can't happen to me, I'm too small, they're not going to go after me. But that's the exact reason that they're going to go after you in some instances, because it's almost like low-hanging fruit to some degree.
Or have the budget limitations
that
the larger businesses don't have. So it's hard. How do you keep up? So it's It's tough.
It's definitely a challenge for sure and we're just in the beginning stages. So, good stuff to look forward to, right? Um, how do companies handle the ethical considerations tied to using AI for surveillance and monitoring in the realm of IT security, right? I mean, there's been a lot in the news as of late in regards to some of these different arenas, like Madison Square Garden down in New York City uses facial recognition, right, to kind of identify folks who maybe should or shouldn't be there. I'm mostly on the shouldn't side of things, right? But AI is only going to kind of enhance that, right? And the capabilities for that. So, how should companies be handling those ethical considerations, particularly when it comes to the realm of security?
So
Go
I
ahead.
first think about sorry. See, I told you I'll always get cut off. I first think about the banner, the logon banner that says basically you have no right to privacy, right? When you log on to use our systems, you have no right to privacy. Your data is our data when you're working on our systems. That's the first, Jeff, when you ask that question, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I think that pertains to how we're monitoring and logging our users or even our customers who are using our systems. So I personally don't really see an ethical, and Lynn's probably going to correct me, and that is what I hope happens, but I don't really see an issue ethically with that, as long as we're disclosing it the same way we would without the use of AI. And we're using your Madison Square Garden example, if you're doing no good, if you're in there to make trouble and cause trouble, then I want the place that my children are going to be monitored and surveilled to the utmost of the law, and I don't really care about the ethics of it. And I think about the same way with our users. We want our users to behave and treat our company like it was their own. And if we can use AI to help monitor and log and track that, then I personally don't have an ethical issue with it. We see to make sure that we notify them, right? That's that banner, that's that employee handbook, that's that NDA, the code of conduct, that's all the things that we're having them sign upon hire.
So I just want to caution a little bit, and that's not because I'm a lawyer. I'm going to you're all going to make fun of me, but there's two things to think about here, and not only ethics but also laws, right? So when it comes to monitoring your employees, it used to be that there weren't any laws around monitoring your employees, and now there are. And specific state laws have popped up on how you can monitor even the use of company assets. So you should be aware of that, as well as we're going to see this in the AI realm, because already in the healthcare space, and it also depends on your industry, in the healthcare space, there is guidance and proposed regulations that there has to be almost like a nutritional, the nutritional label on food. There's now going to be a label if you are using AI or not. And that goes to CJ's point about transparency. But there is a big difference between your employees and consumers, so be aware of that. There's different laws that apply. Secondly, when it comes to consumers, transparency is the most important thing. But I will say that we also have 10 state laws now, new state laws around data privacy that require very specific things around how you're collecting and using individuals' data, personal information. And AI is going to be another layer on top of that, because again, the black box nature of AI. So I would suggest that just being transparent on your website probably won't be enough for AI as we see all these laws and regulations evolve, because there's no way for them to delete. And in California GDPR, you have the ability to request deletion of your data, and that's much more complicated with AI. So I would be looking at this a little more in a little more complex way to determine what you're telling, the transparency, and how people can actually have privacy rights if they want their data deleted and compliance with these new state laws. And then the last thing I would say is from an ethics standpoint, I think you've got to make a business decision for your company on how you view privacy with your consumers. If you look at Apple, Apple is probably the best known for saying, no, we really care about your privacy. We're not just going to monetize it. And now we're seeing all of this litigation around tracking technology and pixel technology. If you don't know about that, take a look at that, because it's not just in single industries. So be careful about, just be thinking about it, I think, in a little more strategic way about how you want your consumers to view you, but also the risks out there that we're seeing with regard to pixel technology tracking, et cetera, which will be enhanced by AI. And now I'll be quiet. Sorry.
No, that's great.
Yeah, and I agree with CJ. I'm going to rely on Lynn's legal advice there. But I would say that, again, augmenting what you have, using AI to do better surveillance with less resources automatically and picking out things. We know that a lot of attacks can be insider threats. And so having AI recognize that and doing that surveillance, and instead of having humans do the surveillance, have AI do it and then call out certain areas of interest. And so then you can just focus in on that, would be much better. But I would say I would agree with what's been mentioned.
Yeah, would that be user entity, behavior analytics, right? Learning what these people do on a day-to-day basis, what their normal operations are, and any deviance from that.
Absolutely. Right? Yep. It could be screen monitoring and stuff. Even going on to the consumer side of things, I saw a news kind of story where they were looking at shoplifters, comparing different clothing articles with someone taking something off of a shelf, and either it's going into a basket, a cart, or someone's coat pocket. Having that recognition and that surveillance. But to your point, that's on the consumer side. Are you putting signs on the door or something like that? We already had cameras in there. We already had humans monitoring the cameras. Now we're having AI do that for us.
Great point.
It's a great point. This is kind of an interesting question, right? Because we're talking about two kind of interesting topics when we talk about AI, and then we talk about zero-day vulnerabilities, right? And let's combine the two and make it really fun. How reliable are AI solutions in detecting zero-day vulnerabilities compared to traditional methods, right? So I don't know who wants to take that one to start.
I'm happy to. So we resell a lot of cybersecurity solutions. And when like this AI stuff came out, whether it was true AI, we also have AGI, more general type AI, which is more human consciousness. Or is this just machine learning, some wicked cool machine learning? There's a kind of a difference there, but AI solutions definitely, when those came out, they were able to recognize very quickly with low resources required on the endpoints and mobile devices, laptops, workstations, servers, the malicious code very quickly with high efficacy, which was pretty cool. So things like like Cylance, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne are using these type of technologies. And I think the signature-based solutions, they couldn't keep up. Something had to change. And that had to change was AI. And still to this day, I don't think you can use a signature-based solution. I think those have their place. It's still being leveraged, but I think what's really getting most use is that AI component to recognize live modern malware. And it's not just, is a file malicious? It might be the behavior of the file after it's been executed, or so many other different dimensions of what's going on, communication-wise, file-wise, email-wise, of what's bad.
Chris, can I go? I sometimes ask questions as a conversation approach, but I apologize to put you on the spot. But if we're talking to the audience here, and you're talking to me as somebody who's running a security program, and I'm going to go look for a new solution to help me do vulnerability scanning and monitoring, next gen, right? And then AI machine, AI powered. What are you telling me to start to look for? What should I be prioritizing when I'm trying to select
Yeah, I think the marketing of next gen, I mean, we still hear like next gen firewalls, but that's, we've been selling next gen firewalls for over a decade and maybe two. So the thing is next gen AI, a lot of marketing companies get ahead of what their products are capable of doing. But I definitely think companies that are leveraging AI type components or machine learning is definitely the modern way of doing things. And not all companies do it the same. But I think when they're companies will go get a component, bring it in, and say we have AI now. They're marketing this AI, but that's not true. It's just kind of like writing a paper, writing code using AI. You have to have oversight. So eyeballs on it. So when you're looking at new modern cybersecurity solutions, run it through its paces. Know what you're trying to get from an outcome perspective. Know what you have today, and then put it through a POC, testing all of those components at a very granular level to make sure that what is the AI actually doing? And what things that we have seen in the past is that we'll create our own malicious code. So it's not going to be recognized by signature, maybe not be recognized by behavior. It's seen by all these solutions, and see what that behavior recognition is by these different solutions. But AI definitely is the modern marketing approach. And I definitely think leveraging is good. We're seeing that a lot with cybersecurity, but I would say that I've seen also a lot of it is false. It's not really AI components.
And a lot of the time, an out-of-the-box type of AI solution isn't going to fit every company's needs or every situation's needs. So, kind of echoing what Chris is saying, you really want to make sure that as you add a tool into your situation, that you have fully tested it for your purposes, because otherwise, you've got a giant thing that you don't quite know what it's doing. And sure, it might work a lot in the beginning stages, but then there might be those other aspects. So I like that term, putting it through its paces.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like there's really much of an AI Swiss Army knife out there, right? It's not one size fits all by any stretch. We did have a question that came in from one of the participants here that I think is an interesting one, right? So can AI tools be leveraged to improve incident response time and efficiency in IT security incident scenarios? And what are the possible challenges in that type of solution? So it's kind of interesting, right? We started talking a little bit about, I don't want to say the negatives of AI, but the risks, right, that it introduces. So I guess this is kind of, we're flipping the script a little bit in terms of how can it benefit us in terms of, or can it benefit us when we have to enact our incident response plan, and what does that look like throughout the course? So I don't know who wants to take that one.
Yeah, I'll go first, and I'm going to let Chris go afterwards, because I know, but he's going to be able to do way better at this than me. But I'm going to tell you right now, when we think about incident response, it's timeliness, right? Every second counts when you're going through it. And when you can have AI that can do that threat detection and identify something, and having the right tools to alert us, so that now we can contain, you can even use it to do an auto type of response. I think that's where it's a game changer for us on the defense side, right? And Chris, I'm sure you got a lot more to add to that than.
Yeah, I would say incident response is all about analysis, bringing in all the data you can, analyzing and figuring out, okay, what is the impact and what do we do? What's the immediate response that we have? So I think, you a lot of companies have these war rooms. Something happened. It's an event. Is it actually at the incident level? Let's go through our IR plan. And then we're going through that plan. We recognize, okay, we do have an incident on our hands. How do we use, the benefit? A lot of times the IR organizations that will respond and come in and help you augment the organization with an incident, they're often deploying a lot of these AI tools to go out there and now you actually have analysis from tools that, what came into my network, what came into my systems, what came through email, bringing all these different log components and telemetry potentially have tools in AI see something come in via email. It was being analyzed, so it was delivered to the user. Analysis said, okay, that was bad. User machine maybe caught it. Maybe the endpoint security system caught it. But you can have a response go out and notifications go out. So AI is definitely helping out with the analysis side of things significantly.
Love it. And again, I go back to the speed, right? I think speed, being able to do this quickly, right? You see companies who it took them how long to identify the issue. They came across it by accident, right? And by then the damage has been done. So being able to increase the speed of detection and containment, to Chris's point, this speeds that entire process up. And then in the end, again, sometimes in the back end, the analysis, right? Once it's been contained and we've limited it, this all happens a lot faster. So I think speed with incident response, I think anybody who's gone through it will agree, speed. And I certainly think that AI certainly helps us with that.
Yeah, I think the most recent statistic is it takes 270 days for an organization to find out that there's an intruder, right? So if you can lessen that amount of time, one, you'll lessen the damage done by the threat actor while they're in your system and the exfiltration of data, but also you can respond much quicker. It's like 9 months. So the threat actors, the average is they're in there for 9 months. Think about how much data they can get access to.
That dwell time. And a lot of attacks are not necessarily going to be ransomware. It could be something where they're exporting that data, using it for extortion, or just potentially waiting for, nation states waiting until that quantum computer comes out. They can decrypt your information. Chances are you probably don't have it encrypted already. So they're using that in other ways. It's going to be malicious, but it's not going to be disruptive. You're not going to know that it's happening. And that's a problem.
Somewhat terrifying. We had another question come in from one of the participants here. Katie, I feel like this one might be right up your alley. So let's see what you got here. As the laws and regulations evolve in the AI space, where are the training grounds for the new crop of professionals needed to execute and develop the new rules? I believe the NYU School of Law has a program, but I'd be curious to know of any other sources. Is this something that's getting talked about on the educational side? I mean, I know this is kind of a little bit of a legal question. So Lynn, this might be up your alley too, but it's definitely obviously education based. So where are these new folks coming from, especially when it comes to both sides, right? Implementing these AI solutions, but then also understanding the legal ramifications of it. So Lynn, I don't know if you have any pieces too.
I think as far as kind of where we are with training, I mean, with AI being such a hot topic, as we could say right now, we're seeing a lot of places trying to kind of create new programs. New England Tech is actually building a separate software engineering bachelor's degree with a specification in AI and AI tools. And on the same side, we're also developing a cybersecurity engineering program so that we're not just trying to raise new monitors and responders, but also raise engineers with that actual true security in mind and AI kind of as a part of that mix. I would say that any good software engineering program that is contemporary and kind of with it has an exploration of AI for their students. I'm always going to come back to that foundational need that you have to have engineers who are staying on top of it. I also have a lot of students who are coming into our programs that have that interest, so are kind of being driven by their own curiosity to kind of learn more or kind of delve into deeper questions. But I think it's changing so fast, and people have so much opportunity to kind of get into it a little bit on their own, that I'm glad to learn about the NYU School of Law. I know that, as Lynn has kind of mentioned, it's going to be a little bit before we see some true regulation at a standardized level. But I know that all of our students go through ethics classes, they go through practice and different types of industry compliance so that they're not leaving, without that in mind. But we're also really trying to ensure that they understand when they are placed in the field or an industry that there is a new level of regulation and compliance based on that company. So I do think a lot of the training, as others on the panel have mentioned already, is really going to kind of come from leadership and guidance of the individual companies of what their expectations are. But as far as training goes, we're working on it. I try to instill good practice and good ethics, but also ensuring that there is that foundational build off of.
Yeah, I'll just add that many colleges and universities have had cybersecurity programs, and I think that this is a natural place for those programs to enhance their training, like Katie and New England Tech is doing. I helped start the joint JD Masters of Cybersecurity at Roger Williams Law School. BC has one, Carnegie Mellon, well known in this space. But what I would say from the legal and compliance part of it, there's a dearth of talent right now in the legal industry around data privacy and cybersecurity, and that will continue to grow because there aren't enough students to actually fill the demand. I think what we're going to see is companies and their legal departments, like we're seeing right now in cybersecurity and have for the last 10 years, they're going to find someone who's interested in this area, and they're going to have to learn it, and they're going to have to figure it out. And I think it's going to be organically grown, just like legal and compliance has for many years in data privacy and cybersecurity. The same thing's going to happen. So those lawyers, like I have an AI team at my law firm, and it's a new cross section of IP lawyers because there's a huge area for IP, and it's a multidisciplinary, because it's not just data privacy and cybersecurity. There's so many other pieces of it. Technology, we've got technology lawyers as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of jockeying, but I think if anyone's kids are going to law school or into compliance, this is the place to be.
It's also one of those things, right, that you don't really know what you don't know until you're kind of confronted with it. And as much as we want to offer proactive plans, a lot of the times it is a reactive type of space. And until we see some really big things start to throw a wrench in it, having that actual training is a little tough.
Yeah, and higher ed is always a little slow to catch up too, right? So
yeah,
I think there's going to be a lot of organic, and hopefully high schools will start getting into the action, and you'll get VOTEC schools. I think that's hopefully they'll get into the action too.
Yeah, it's a great point. And as it continues to develop and changes, you're right. It's a hot area to really be in for sure. And it's a very interesting area as well. So we have about a minute left here. So I don't know if there's any last minute questions from any of the participants. So I'll give a moment for anyone to kind of pop those in there. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning, because frankly, I forgot. This is actually being recorded. You probably saw that on your screen. So this is going to be posted out to our YouTube channel probably within the next, I'd say, next week is a holiday, right? So I'd say within the next, week or so, we'll give you kind of a general piece there. So you can kind of check it out if you want to go back and re-review or send it to someone in your organization that's had some questions related to AI. I don't think I see any other questions that are coming in here. But Brian Kelly did post in there another training if folks are interested to go and take a peek at as well. That was just done. I think it was yesterday, actually, in regards to some of the different AI versus AI and kind of the conversation that we had to some degree in terms of using it for good and not so good, right? So if you want, you can take a peek at that as well. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to Lynn, Chris, Katie, and CJ for taking the time out. I think this is an awesome topic. It's obviously something that we're hearing quite a bit about, right? It seems to be every 10 seconds. There's a new AI tool that's out there, right? And Google AI, it's just wild. So But as with anything in the security world, with great reward comes great risk. So understanding those is essential. So I want to thank you guys for sharing your time, your expertise in this area, because I think it's super important. So without any additional questions, I'll say thank you to all the participants for taking their time out of their day to join us this afternoon. And again, take a look at the Compass YouTube channel where the recording of this will be posted. And we appreciate everybody's time, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, guys. Great job.
You.